Wow, thank you, John. Good to hear the organ. Fab. So, time for all ages. Shadow the flying therapy dog. Now, part of my reflections this morning are around how within working in a palliative care environment, how we kind of keep ourselves grounded. Because that's actually, sounds stating the obvious, but it is actually really important to find ways within times of feeling insecure, how we just manage to kind of keep that sense of groundedness, both professionally and also as colleagues for each other. Sadly, over the last couple of years, for obvious reasons, our therapy dog, we did have the most gorgeous therapy dog that would come into the hospice and would do what therapy dogs did. One of the great things that I remember of our therapy dog is, sadly I couldn't remember the name, but we have a yearly annual remembrance service up at the parish church in Hampstead. And the therapy dog was accompanying me for a time. It's my first time there, and we kind of met up with the owner as well. It didn't just arrive on its own, but it was there beside me. And there was a point where the dog just got up and went over to someone who was sitting on their own. And it was amazing, because afterwards I introduced myself gently, as we do on these occasions. And she was saying how it was the first time she had come to a memorial service in honour of her mum, who had died, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. And she was very much on her own. And somehow the dog had just kind of picked her out and just went and sat beside her for the service. It was amazingly touching. And therapy dogs, the story about Shadow I absolutely love, because it's a guy in America, Dan Mcmanus. Now, Dan, as I understand, he had significant mental health issues, but his background was that he was a trapeze artist. And the things that helped him remain grounded, to use that word, was actually to be up in the air. So he developed and became a hang gliding instructor and set up his own hang gliding business. Alongside that, he had his own therapy dog, Shadow. And Shadow had got this sense of knowing when an anxiety attack was going to happen to Dan. And Shadow would kind of get himself close to help Dan calm down. That was all good, but there was this kind of issue about Dan taking off in the hang glider. And as I understand, the story goes, is that the dog would kind of be nearly hanging on to Dan's boots as he was trying to take off. So what Dan then did was, far more practical man than I would be, made a special harness that went onto the hang glider so that Dan and his therapy dog could take off together and enjoy each other's company in that way. And I just thought it's a lovely illustration of ways of keeping ourselves grounded. Anybody who knows me knows that I was brought up with pet goats, and I go to the city farms and spend times with my friendly goats, as I call them, when I want a little bit of breathing space. But perhaps in these days, finding those spaces, finding connection, whether it be animals or with people, is actually really important. So Dan and his flying dog may be useful just to keep in mind and think about those ways of keeping ourselves grounded. Okay, we're going to sing the children off now to Children's Chapel. I think you've got the words in the order of service. Go now in peace. Go now in peace. Go in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of God surround you every day, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. I've got some words now that I'd like to share with you. I don't know if you know the words and works of a guy called John O'Donoghue. He's quite inspirational for me in the sense of linking or integrating spirituality, both Christian, other faiths, interfaith, with nature, and also psychological insights as well. So I do tend to use his work a lot. And I'm very, sadly he passed away a few years back, but one of the books that he produced was a book of blessings, which I found really helpful over the years in being in different situations and being able to find words in the sense of blessing upon people and situations. And this is called A Blessing for Presence. And why I refer to these words is because at the hospice, so if I keep pointing over there, it's because the hospice is in Belsize Park, so that's the reason why if I keep pointing that way. At the hospice, when I first started, it's kind of like, I remember having a discussion with a couple of people, introducing myself, and it was very much a case of, so what do you do here then? Which is a fair enough question, and what is the role of chaplain within contemporary palliative care? And my answer is that there's basically three strands to chaplaincy, which is pastoral care. So that is very much the practical side, listening to, seeing patients, listening out for any practical things that may be sorting to. Work closely with us alongside social workers on this one. But for example, if a patient is missing their pet, at times we've arranged for pets to get a visit to be able to come in, or keys have to be picked up. There's some very practical things that you just have to listen out for that may help the sense of well-being for a patient. So there's pastoral care. There's spiritual care. And that can be the sense of coming alongside people who are in understandable emotional distress, or indeed, sometimes with in some conversations, there can be new insights. We might term as spiritual awakenings, but again, to listen, to come alongside, to be with patients, partners, families, and friends. And then there is religious care, so we do more than try, we ensure that we understand a person's religious identity, because particularly in palliative care, so on Friday when I was last there was the possibility of a patient passing away. It was because of their faith, there would be need for a quick burial. So all has to be in place, and we have to make sure dietary needs are also sorted out. So they're the three main aspects. But as the psychologist at the time, Jo, looked at me once, she said, yeah, but that isn't just your job, is it? So I was like, so what else are you expecting me to do? And she said, but it's about your presence. What is it that you bring here? Your being. And she said, I think that's a really important part of the role. Particularly for chaplaincy, she thought, I'd say for colleagues as well. But our presence, what is it that people take from us? From our energy, if you like. So here's the words by John O'Donoghue. that I sometimes reflect upon that help me in the focus of my work. May you awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. May you have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. May you receive great encouragement when new frontiers beckon. May you respond to the call of your gift and find the courage to follow its path. May the flame of anger free you from falsity. May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame and anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of your soul. May you take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. May you be consoled in the secret symmetry of your soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. Amen. I could take nearly every kind of line there, but I won't. Although I would say it is one of the few churches where the preacher actually doesn't have a clock in front of them, but I will keep an eye on time and just pick up on a couple of lines of that in a few moments. But we're going to sing now. Morning has broken, and yes, this does go back to my childhood. It hopefully will be familiar with yourselves as well. If you are able, I invite you to stand and to sing. We're very fortunate over at the hospice because we have lovely gardens that are well looked after by volunteers, and I tend to regard the garden as my office, to be honest. When I need a bit of a breathing space, I take myself out there. I did suggest to our leaders a couple of weeks ago over a conversation in the canteen that because I love community farms, that's where I go to see the goats. I just thought the idea of having a community farm surrounding the hospice and making the most of garden with chickens and goats and and donkeys was a good idea. But apparently they didn't think that would be such a go, and they weren't too sure whether the good folk of Belsize Park would be quite ready for that. But that sense of connection with nature is one of the beautiful things when you see patients going out into our gardens and just being out there, and that sense of connection and how it does often bring its own healing in the broadest sense of that world. So the last couple of years, there are many kind of things. So I've been involved with the hospice for just over 4 years. I took on the role as chaplain at the beginning of this year. And there have been many, as you can imagine, moments. I've learned a lot, shall we say, over the last few months about the world around me and the world within me. One of the things that I have got used to doing is putting on, say, the PPE. One of the strangest memories over the summer, when it was a baking hot day, I was put all the relevant gear on, including the gloves and hand sanitizer and aprons, mask and visor. I went in to see a lady who I visited regularly. She did come from a Christian background, but she had dementia. One of the things that I try to do with patients, particularly with dementia, is find what they will connect with, whether that be through listening to music or words. With her, she particularly related to hearing the Lord's Prayer. So I got the Lord's Prayer copied out in kind of on a piece of paper, and was able to take in, hold up, and she would join in with me in saying them. On this occasion, I went in and it was very hot, and we began to say the words of the Lord's Prayer, and I began to sweat rather profusely. Somehow, and my hubby will kind of back this up, I'm not really the most practical of people, and so things kind of happen that I don't always kind of have an awareness of what's going to take place. I'd got hand sanitizer on the visor inside. As I began to sweat, the sanitizer began to run down my face and eventually got into my eyes. Can I just say, that hurts, all right? Do not put, it's really very clear why it's a hand sanitizer. Do not, it really does hurt. And there I was trying to say the Lord's Prayer with stinging eyes, and bless her, and she was lovely. And on this occasion, the patient was quite fluent and was able to discuss a little bit about why the Lord's Prayer meant so much to her, and she was recalling Sunday school days, and I was absolutely stinging by the time I got out. And I was recalling this with some colleagues, because we take times to do reflections and kind of the impact that different patients can have on us and what we can learn. So I was reflecting on this, and one of my colleagues, and I stopped kind of saying what had happened, and one of my colleagues just looked up and said, "So where's the miracle?" And I was like, "I don't know. That's a good question. Is that what you expected?" And he was like, "Well, you know, your role." I said, so we had a discussion around spirituality and what we expect in that way. But it was a question that did linger. So where's the miracle? Working in palliative care, sometimes you get the sense of people waiting for a miracle. And I would add, it's not any of our jobs to come in, to take away where people have a hope in a miracle. It isn't our job to take that hope away. One of the things that helps me in keeping grounded, and I think this is part of the miracle, if you like, of working, seeing colleagues, how they attend and attune to people, both from a clinical and psychological, emotional and spiritual perspective. They're in it. And what inspires me, so from the words of John O'Donoghue, he talks about calling, follow the gift. And sadly, I think, we don't talk about that sense of calling, that vocation that people can have. And what helps me in being grounded is that I was brought up a Christian, and I would identify as a Christian, although if you say, what do you actually believe? I'm not sure that I could define it, but hey, that's another discussion. But how do we define God? Can words ever, if that is your belief? Or how do we really define the world around us? In that sense, there is a mystery to engage with. But I love the story of the baptism of Jesus, and it really changed for me a couple of years back. Because in my mind, the baptism of Jesus, it's recorded in the different Gospels of Mark and Luke, but from stained glass windows, I think, that I was brought up with seeing, the baptism of Jesus to me was a very clean event. Jesus in white, everybody queuing up. There was something clean and orderly about it. And then somebody told me to watch a Pasolini's film, which I think came about in 1964-65, of St. Matthew's Gospel, because it gives a very different feel. And the reason being is you see the guy who's playing Jesus just being in the multitudes and in muddy waters. And the idea that spirituality is born, developed within the struggle as well as in the joys. And very much part of my role is being there within the struggles. Sometimes wanting to give the miracles that perhaps people are wanting, but not always able to, rarely. But believing and trusting that in those, what John O'Donoghue talks about, those small miracles, that moment of connection, and being there, and just being there. From a universal church, I managed to find these words, which are a chaplain's blessing. And I thought I would share them with you. I think that I like to give congregations a bit of a challenge, all right? I like to bring comfort, but I also feel as if there's a challenge as well for faith communities. The feedback when I got married here from friends and family who gathered was just the beauty of this sanctuary. And I think there is something about, as faith communities, how we make the most of our sacred places, how we connect with each other. Yes, it can be about discussion and opinions, but at this time in particular, I think there's this sense of the need for connection and community. So when I read this blessing, I invite you to think about the work that goes on here with the members as well as with Kate, and find both the encouragement and the challenge. So a chaplain's blessing. This work isn't all beautiful moments, nor is it laments and trauma. It's not even both and, because this work is something greater than you, greater than us, greater than the whole of those we serve. This work is a calling, and we're doing it day after day after day, visit after visit after visit. We are doing the hard and holy work that we are called to. That matters. That fact matters because when we feel we did not do enough, or we did not care enough, or we did not do something enough, we were there in that moment with that patient or that family, giving, loving, ministering. You, me, us, holy witnesses to the divine in all of its messy humanity. Us. We did it. We are doing it. And we are doing it again. And every time we do, it will be enough. For we cannot give more than we have. And for us, we give what we can when there is nobody else to give. And that is enough. And so are you. You are enough. We are enough. May it be well. Amen. We're going to light some candles. So we take time just quietly for a few moments, invite you just to hold people in mind who you would just want to be mindful of in this hour and in this time. Spirit of kindness and compassion, we come from different places to this sacred ground of communal caring. We are enriched by the company of each other and are drawn closer to the heart of love in this time of service. Touch this gathering, both here and online, with tenderness, so that we may be refreshed anew by the grace that encompasses this morning. Spirit of mercy, we are human and fragile and often frightened. We pray for the blessing of compassion as we face our frustration and pain. We pray for the blessing of courage to help us live with the fear of losing and the sorrow of loss. We especially pray for all those among us who need to feel the warmth of love in their lives. Spirit that glows in the darkness, expand our vision with faith so we may always remember the unending circle of life and death and love reborn that surrounds us with kindness and compassion. Spirit that glistens in the light, bless this community that shares so generously with their hands and their hearts. Keep us ever mindful of the powerful possibilities of love as we walk through all the seasons of our lives. Amen and amen. And so we come to our final hymn, Be Thou My Vision. It's been lovely to join with you this morning. I will happy to chat and that over a cup of coffee or cup of tea and that afterwards. And just to say to people online as well, those who I may know, just to say a hello as well. Getting used to doing online ministry has become part of the norm for many ministers up and down the land, and we've done virtual memorial services as well. My mate, when he did his first one, he's an Anglican priest, he did the whole of the service on his side. They hadn't quite got the equipment right, and so he was somehow on the side. But I think we're all still learning how to make the most of working in that way. But it does give a different way of connection, and which I think we should be grateful for. So let us stand, if you are able, to sing the hymn, Be Thou My Vision. And now a final blessing and benediction. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other. Our service is to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, be strong, be well, be true, and be loving. Amen.
Thank you very much, John, for the wonderful music. Thank you, everybody who helps make this a special time and a special place. And obviously, thank you to Martyn. We do hope that you can come again. Thank you for imparting and sharing your wisdom and knowledge and experiences. So it's great. Thank you.